CHAPTER III Part 2 of the Life Story of a Russian Exile by Marie Sukloff Translated by Gregory Yaros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Chapter 3 Part 2 Section 3 Easter came, my second one in prison. Easter had been my favorite holiday in the village, but here it made me still more sad. The church bells which toll so solemnly and joyfully outside, in liberty, here in the prison sounded like the ringing of bells at a funeral. There is no holiday for the prisoner. On such days he feels still more keenly that he is not free, and is deprived of the possibility of being with those dear to him. The longing for my folks at home, and the desire to know something about them, almost drove me insane. My enforced solitude on those days became unbearable. On the second day unusual sounds reached my ear. Now loud, now subdued, they seemed to crowd into my cell from all sides. Guards ran past my door more and more frequently. I became uneasy. What can it mean? In alarm I paced my cell like a caged animal, seeking to escape from those sounds which filled me with a strange foreboding. I knocked on the door and the guard came. "What is going on?" I asked him. He only motioned with his hand and went away. But I felt that those sounds would drive me mad. I knocked again, and the same guard came. "I cannot stand it any longer," I began, greatly agitated. "I shall go mad if you don't tell me what are these cries. For God's sake, only one word," I implored him. The guard looked at me for a few seconds and said in a whisper, "It was ordered to kill the Jews. That's what it is." All my blood rushed into my head at these words. I remained standing near the door, unable to take a step. An hour or so later the door of my cell opened, and the governor entered. "Collect your things. You are transferred to another cell." His words made no impression upon me. It was all the same to me whether I was to remain in this hole, or go to a better cell, or even be released. I heard nothing. I was conscious of nothing but the cries of the Jews who were being killed. A strange sight greeted my eyes when I was led out of my cell. The whole prison yard was covered with feathers which the wind brought from town. These were from the Jewish pillows and feather beds torn by the rioters. Soon the prison filled with Jews who sought protection within its walls, but this did not enter into the plans of the authorities, and an order was issued not to let any more Jews into the prison. For 2 days and 2 nights the massacre of the Jews continued, and their agonizing cries were heard in our prison. Only on the third day they began to arrest the rioters, who were so drunk that they could not walk, and the police carried them into the cells. Several days after the pogrom, I was called to the examination. The procureur and the same gendarme colonel met me with very solemn faces. The procureur said to me, "You are accused of belonging to a secret society, which has for its object the overthrow of the existing form of government, and of conspiring against the sacred person of His Imperial Majesty. With this aim in view, you took part in the establishment of a secret printing office and the distribution of forbidden proclamations, which instigated a pogrom in the city of Kishinev. Are you guilty of the criminal offenses?" I was dumbfounded. "How is that?" I protested when I had regained my power of speech. "I have been in prison since February 8th, 1902. So how can I be accused of instigating the pogrom which took place only a few days ago?" "The point is," said the procureur, "that the letters which were found in the pocket of your dress are of the same identical type with which the forbidden leaflets were printed. As to your plotting to overthrow the existing form of government, this can be seen from your letters to Nikolai Shpeizman. In one of them you say, 'I shall not rest until I shed the blood of the vampire.' Do you admit that these letters," here he took out of a portfolio a bundle of my letters to Comrade Nikolai, who was serving in the army, "found on Private Shpeizman, and which are written in Yiddish, are yours?" "Yes," I replied, "but these letters were written a year ago, and I do not remember having used the expression you attribute to me." "This will be the business of experts to determine," he said. "And now, the preliminary inquest in your case has been terminated, and by order of His Excellency, the Minister of the Interior, Plehve, you will be put on trial." The examination was over, and I was led back to my cell. After this examination it became clear to me that I would not be released so soon. The letters which were found on Comrade Nicholai were ample evidence against me, as I spoke in them in no uncertain tones about the tyranny of the government. The thought that my comrade must have been arrested and, being a soldier, would surely be court-martialed, darkened my existence still more. In the meantime the prison was being filled with politicals and anti-Jewish rioters. The latter were being arrested because they declared that they had been ordered to kill the Jews. Small cells built for one now sheltered 2 or 3 people. One night a woman carrying a little baby in her arms was brought into my cell. She was arrested together with her husband and servant. Her husband, one Alexander Orloff, was one of the leading spirits of the Social Democratic Party, and at his house was found a secret printing office where the first issues of the well-known forbidden journal Iskra, the Spark, had been printed. The presence of the woman and her 9 months-old baby completely changed my prison life. My own sufferings seemed to me as nothing compared to those of the mother and child. This child later played a great part in my life. A few weeks after their arrest, Mrs. Orloff chanced to see her husband through the window, and called out to him, "Good morning." Just at that moment the governor of the prison was crossing the yard. He immediately ordered to put her in the kartzer. When the guard came to take her, she refused to go, saying that she could not leave the baby. Then the governor ordered that she be taken by force. Hearing this, I shouted to Mr. Orloff, "Your wife is being taken to the kartzer." He began to knock on the door of his cell, calling for the governor. Several guards came into his cell, gave him a terrible beating, and tied him hand and foot. On learning of it, all the politicals began to make a terrific noise, knocking on the doors with their feet, throwing the furniture on the floor, and shouting for the governor to come. He came, but with a company of soldiers. He lined them up in the yard, and himself with several soldiers came into our cell. Mrs. Orloff held the baby in her arms, pressing it close to her breast. "Soldiers," she addressed herself to them, "is it possible that you will have the heart to tear me away from my little baby?" She cried, and the baby, frightened by the sight of strange men, screamed at the top of its voice. The soldiers were taken aback and did not dare come near her. Then the governor himself approached her, seized her by the arms, and began to squeeze them above the elbows. After a struggle which lasted a few minutes, the arms of the mother relaxed, and the baby fell to the floor. A pitiful moan filled the cell. "Take him," shouted the governor to the soldiers, "and get him out of here." I seized a log and threw it at the governor's head, but he jumped aside. He ordered to take me also to the kartzer. When Mrs. Orloff and I were led to the kartzer, the whole prison was in an uproar. The noise of falling furniture, knocking, and shouting was deafening. The common law criminals had seen the soldiers carrying somewhere a half-naked child and joined the politicals in the protest. Soon the procureur arrived. He visited every cell and assured the prisoners that the child had been restored to its mother, and that the mother had been released from the kartzer. The common law criminals quieted down, but the politicals, knowing from past experience that his word could not be trusted, continued the noise. Then they were all tied and lay helplessly on their cots. In the meantime, Mrs. Orloff, locked in the dark cell, was frantic with anxiety over her child's condition. After several hours we were let out from the kartzer, and the baby was brought to the mother. Happily it was not injured, only bruised in some parts of the body. As we learned later, Mr. Orloff, on hearing that the soldiers forced their way into his wife's cell, decided to commit suicide. He managed to break a window, and with a piece of glass began to cut an artery in his arm. A guard happened to open his door at that time and frustrated the attempt. When this had been reported to the governor, he ordered to release us from the kartzer. Section 4. Because of the crowded condition of our prison, it was impossible to maintain a regime of strict isolation. The politicals who had relatives in town were allowed interviews with them. Notwithstanding that these interviews took place in the presence of gendarmes, they succeeded in sending verbal messages to friends outside, and also found out what was going on without the prison walls. The news that the Orloffs, their servant, and I would be put on trial reached the outside world. In those years politicals had not been tried in any court. Since the 70's they had been exiled in the administrative order, which means that any one suspected of political unreliability was sent, after a more or less protracted stay in prison, to some remote northern province, or to Siberia, for as many years as the Minister of the Interior, the chief of the gendarmes, or any gendarme general or colonel saw fit. This was a new move against the politicals by the all-powerful Plehve. The advantage it offered was the possibility of sending them to hard labor, whereas under the old order they were only exiled. This departure from the time-honored system aroused great interest in the liberal circles of Russian society, particularly among the members of the legal profession. Several prominent St. Petersburg lawyers, Maklakoff, Pereversov, Kalmanovitch, and others, wrote to the procureur offering their services to us free of charge. At last copies of the indictment were delivered to us. The crime with which I was charged was punishable by from 8 to 12 years' hard labor. The main evidence against me were my letters, of which the strongest passages were quoted in the indictment. The trial was set for October 15th, 1903. A few days before the trial I was called to the prison office. Instead of the gendarmes I had expected to meet, I saw two gentlemen in civilian clothes. The guard told them my name and went out, leaving me alone with them. This was the first time since my imprisonment that I was alone with free people, without the company of gendarmes. The two gentlemen regarded me for some time in surprise, and then one of them said: "I am Maklakoff, attorney at law, and this is my colleague, Mr. Ratner. We came to defend you." "Are you really the author of the letters which are quoted in the indictment?" he asked, again looking me over in surprise. "Yes, of course," I replied. "How old were you when you wrote those letters?" asked Mr. Ratner. 16." They laughed heartily and shook my hands. "That's clever, very clever!" exclaimed Maklakoff. 8 years' hard labor for letters written at 16? Fine!" He began to pace up and down the room, somewhat agitated. Suddenly he stopped, as if remembering my presence, and said: "But you needn't worry. We will see that you are acquitted." "No," I said, "it will hardly be possible to acquit me. You know, when I wrote those letters I really had no serious intentions. But after they have kept me in these stone walls for over 19 months, my mind is made up, and nothing can ever change it. I hate this despotic government with all the fibers of my soul, and I will fight it to the last drop of blood in me. And I intend to tell this openly to the Czar's court." They remained silent for some time. "We understand you," they said, "and this makes us wish still more to be of help to you." They bade me good by in a very friendly manner and went away, having promised to see me again before the trial. After this interview a beautiful bouquet was brought to me every morning, together with my bread and water. I learned later that these bouquets were sent by my lawyers, who had obtained special permission from the procureur. At last the long awaited day of the trial arrived. On the 15th of October, early in the morning, I was led out of the prison gate. The autumn sun greeted me from a cloudless sky. The air was cool and fragrant. My eyes, which for many months had seen nothing but gray walls, bathed in the green grass. The open space before the prison fascinated me. "To escape," an inner voice whispered to me. A carriage was waiting near the gate. I entered it, and two gendarmes with drawn sabers took their seats on each side of me. The carriage rolled fast over deserted streets, and after a short ride stopped in front of a massive brown brick structure. It was the court house. "Here we are," said one of the gendarmes. They led me into the prisoners' room and locked me in there. But soon the door opened, and the lawyers, counsel for the defense, came in one by one, 6 of them. They were more agitated than I, because they already knew the verdict which had been ordered by Plehve in advance, and felt the futility of their efforts to save us. At 10 o'clock, two gendarmes in brand new uniforms with drawn sabers took me to the court room. The immense hall was empty. Only in a corner, opposite a long table covered with a green cloth, sat my comrades. Gendarmes with drawn sabers stood in front and back of them, but before I reached their bench I noticed, amid a sea of vacant chairs, the bent figure of an old man. He sat with his head bowed low. "Father!" The thought struck me like an electric shock. Instantly I ran to him, and before the gendarmes had time to recover from their surprise, I was near him. "Father, dear!" I had time to say. The trembling arms of my father were torn from my neck, and the gendarmes led me to the prisoners' bench, holding me fast with their free hands. " The court enters. Rise! " called out the court priestav in loud tones. The judges entered, took their seats, and the farce of a trial began. The secretary read the indictment. All of us were charged with having established a secret printing office and published the forbidden journal Iskra. I, in addition, was charged with having uttered threats against the czar's life. The usual questions were asked. In answer to the presiding justice's question, " Do you acknowledge yourself guilty? " I replied, " No. From the letters it will become clear to you that I had no connection with the publication of the Iskra, which is a social democratic organ. I say this not because I want to clear myself, but because I am a convinced socialist revolutionist, and as such have been and always will be an enemy of the existing form of government. I do not expect mercy from anybody." The witnesses gave favorable testimony, with the exception of the official translator of my Yiddish letters. He maintained that one of my expressions was, " I shall not rest until I shed the blood of the vampire," while another translator, not official, said that the sentence read, " I shall not rest until the blood of the vampires is shed." While admitting that my Jewish was poor and ungrammatical, he asserted that this particular sentence was written clearly and correctly, and that he had translated it exactly. May Heaven forgive him. He was simply afraid of the gendarmes. On the second day the speeches of the prosecution and the defense were made. The procureur demanded the maximum sentence of 12 years' hard labor, saying there was no question of my guilt, as I had acknowledged in my speech that I was a social democrat. My counsel, Mr. Ratner, said in his speech: "Private letters cannot serve as evidence before any court, particularly in a case which concerns general idealistic convictions. Such letters always bear the stamp of a subjective mood, and therefore cannot have the value of exact evidence. But if letters are to be believed, how is it possible to pick out one at will and to discard the other? To believe one and not to believe the other? We must believe Miss Sukloff that she is a socialist revolutionist, and the repeated statement of the procureur that she is a social democrat is utterly incomprehensible. Between the socialist revolutionists and the social democrats there is a great difference. The labor organ which Miss Sukloff says in her letters she wants to publish can by no means be the Iskra. Everybody knows perfectly well that this organ is published abroad, and was being issued long before Miss Sukloff wrote her letters. Consequently, she could not have in view the Iskra when she wrote about the intention of herself and her friends to issue a paper. As regards the word vampire, to consider it, particularly in view of the doubtful conscientiousness of the translator, a deliberate intention to commit a definite terrorist act, is juridically impossible. It is simply a poetical expression of the terrorist mood which agitates now by force of circumstances not one young heart in Russia. Whether it was written vampire or vampires is after all of no import to us, because in the letter is expressed only an abstract intention, and to punish for such intentions no court has ever attempted. The substance of the accusation is that the accused had definite opinions, convictions, and general intentions, and all this is quite comprehensible if one will be more attentive to her manner of life. A worker since 15, vivid and bright, she ponders over the strange contrast between her own and her chum's position on the one hand and that of, let us say, their customers, while her own mental superiority to those bedecked ladies could be no secret to her. Reasoning logically, not hampered by prejudices which did not fasten upon her, her thought came to certain conclusions. Meeting with people of greater mental development, she, under their influence, adopted at first the social democratic teachings. But her mind, being of wider scope, did not stop there, and thanks to her militant temperament, she, having become acquainted with the views of the socialist revolutionists, joined them. We ourselves in her place would undoubtedly thirst as much as she for emancipation and the possibility of a better life for herself and others. It must be noted that, notwithstanding the specifically Jewish persecution she was subjected to, the accused did not engage in a narrow nationalistic struggle. She had a broader outlook, and the interests of all humanity are dearer to her. This is a talented nature, responsive to all good. In some other country she might have been happy, but here, among us, alas! This is not possible. The court may, of course, convict her, but it will hardly be a triumph of justice. It will be another ill considered, unjust verdict, of which history knows not a few." After 2 days of anxious waiting the verdict was announced. We were sentenced to be deprived of all rights and exiled to Eastern Siberia for life. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.